Hello, everyone. So we're just waiting for a few seconds to let everyone in before we get started. In the meantime, I'll try to share my screen. I'll try to share. Okay, I think we can make our start, and then people will join us. So welcome to this session, which is, as you know, as you are aware, it is aimed at providing you with an overview of the changes, the revisions that we made at INQAAHE to the international standards and guidelines for the quality assurance of higher education and the ISG review scheme. Now, I'm Fabrizio Triffiero. I'm an INQAAHE board member. I've been a board of director of INQAAHE since 2000, and I'm the chair of the ISG Recognition Committee. The Recognition Committee is the committee that oversees the implementation of the ISG review scheme, as well as its continuous revision, its continuous enhancement to make sure that it continues to meet its purpose and the needs of the international quality assurance community. Now, what I'll do is I'll give you briefly an overview of the main purpose of this revision of the standards framework and the SG review process. I will then give you a bit of an overview of the revised standards framework and the revised SG review process. Now, there's going to be a lot of information thrown at you, so please do not hesitate to stop me at any time and ask any questions, either by raising your hand or asking questions in the chat. I would actually suggest you to raise your hand because I'm sharing my screen and I don't think I'm able to see the chat function. Although there's Beatrice in the background, she may pick up questions. So Bear, if you see any questions that I'm not addressing in the chat, please do let me know, interrupt me. And again, welcome everyone, wherever you are. I am based in the UK. Early afternoon, the sun has just come out. It's been a gloomy day otherwise. So let's get started. So the main purpose and indeed the outcomes of this revision of the international standards and guidelines and the associated review process has been driven, let's say, from our commitment to lessen the burden on agencies wishing to engage with the SG review process, administrative and financial burden, as well as lessening the burden on the INQAAHE Secretariat and the review panel who implement the SG review process. And this is because after 3 years of pilot implementation of the ISG standards framework and review process, which had been developed in 2022, based on feedback from agencies that had gone through that pilot, those pilot exercise, and feedback also from reviewers who implemented those pilot exercise, we noticed that there were areas which really needed improvement, in particular around eliminating redundancies, and in particular clarifying expectations, making clearer to agencies and reviewers how agencies and undergoing review can demonstrate compliance with the standards. Also, a number of stages throughout the review process needed clarifying, including in particular the alignment route, which is known as recognition of prior review. I will come back to all this later in more details. This is just to give you a bit of an overview. Also, the criteria guiding reviewers in expressing their findings needed to be strengthened, formalized to ensure consistency, and then we felt that really agencies engaging with the review process, as well as reviewers having to implement the review process, needed more guidance throughout the process, again, to ensure fairness and consistency and lessen the burden. So these were the main drivers of the review exercise, and this is what we believe we have achieved. So with regard to the ISG framework, and of course, both of these documents you will have seen are available online, and you can download them, you can read them. I hope that some of you may have look at them. If you look at the ISG, the revised ISG frameworks, the 2022 version had 6 themes, contained 17 standards, and included 58 overarching guidelines. And it was the way in which these overarching guidelines in particular were expressed, which was sometimes confusing. They were sometimes difficult to interpret, we found. There were some repetitions, etc. So the new scheme now contains also 6 themes, divided in 18 standards, 3 standards for each theme. In particular, it sets out in a very succinct and clear way the minimum requirements that agencies are expected to be able to demonstrate and meet in order to demonstrate compliance with the standards. You will have seen, if you looked at the new ISG standards framework, you will have seen that it feels very different, it reads very different. However, something very important to stress is that the content is very much equivalent. The content hasn't changed. We haven't really dropped content from the previous standards or significant content from the previous standards. We haven't added content. So there is the content has been safeguarded, and this is very important because the development of the 2022 standards framework was the outcome of a very broad consultative process with our membership and our stakeholders. And however, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier on, we restructured the old framework in a different way. And you will have seen what we've added are 2 key aspects. One is, in addition to spelling out the minimum requirements very clearly, we have added a narrative guidance for each standard, spelling out why the standard is important, the main rationale for the standard, also spelling out again the minimum requirements, but also pointing to some examples of ways in which agencies may implement and comply with that particular standards, pointing to example of good practice, for example, and this all in a very clear and in a succinct way. Also, we provide when agencies start to engaging with the review process, they have to develop the self-evaluation document. We also provide examples of evidence and documentation that agencies might consider submitting together with a self-evaluation document to demonstrate compliance. So this is really as part of our intention to provide more guidance in general to agency throughout the review process, and I will expand on those elements later on as well. So this, at a glance, the new ISG standards framework looks like that. As I would say, 16 themes, 18 standards, 3 standards under each theme. Now, I won't go into the details of each standard, although I may try probably to read these standards to you just to give you a feel. Here, I just give you a bit of visually. I'm just showing what I've just told you. So it starts with a standard, then there is this explanatory narrative. This is just an extract. The narrative is generally a bit longer than that. And then you got a box at the bottom with the minimum requirements. So when reviewers will review your agency or an agency against the ISG standards, they will focus for each standard on those minimum requirements there. It is those that the agency has to demonstrate compliance with in order to to fully meet that particular standard. So if we look, if you bear with me, let's look at each standard under each section. So the first thematic section is legitimacy, mission, and governance. The first standard is about the quality assurance agency being legally established and recognized by relevant stakeholders. The quality assurance agency, as for mission, having a defined and publicized mission that explicitly states its role in external quality assurance of higher education, outlining the purpose and scope of its activities. And the quality assurance agency also should have a clear governance model, ensuring its independence and accountability to key stakeholders. So legal basis and stakeholder recognition, having a transparent and very clearly outlined missions so that key stakeholders understand the range of activities that the quality assurance agency undertakes, and also governance structure needs to be publicized, needs to be understood externally, and in particular needs to be structured so as to ensure accountability and independence, include independence from government. The second thematic session is organizational capacity and strategic planning. So it is about organizational culture, the quality assurance agency, organizational structure support. So actually, that's my mistake. It should be organizational structure, not organizational culture. It's a typo. So the organizational structure supports the effective and efficient and transparent execution of its mission and objectives, resources and capacity. The agency should be adequately resourced so as to enable it to fulfill its mission and objectives. Strategic planning should be driving the activities of the quality assurance agency. Moving to the third thematic section, the quality assurance framework. And by framework, we intend the combination of both the standards and the process which implements the standard. So quality assurance agencies should conduct the quality assurance activities based on transparent, clear, and comprehensive procedures, as well as based on publicly available, clear, and actionable standards. And by the way, we can also, the way in which we can see our revision of the ISG and the ISG review process is to somehow implement on ourselves those standards themselves. For example, we made some of the revisions because we felt that at times the quality assurance standards in the previous framework were in particular actionable, or they weren't clear how they could be actionable. So we tried really to make sure that whatever we put in the ISG standards can be applied to the ISG and the ISG review process itself. Standard 9, fitness for purpose and institutional autonomy. So it is this is an important standard, in fact, because there is where we make sure that agencies have processes that are fit for purpose for the different higher education activities that they oversee and quality assure, and where it is required, this should be tweaked, for example, for online learning or transnational education or micro-credentials, as well as making sure that the quality assurance processes acknowledge institutional autonomy and diversity. I think there is, I can hear an echo. If you could perhaps mute yourself just in case. Yeah, that's great. So the last three thematic sections, evaluation and outcome, this has to do with the way in which quality assurance agencies arrive and make their decisions. Of course, this should be fair, impartial, evidence-based, consistent. When an agency adopts peer reviewers, there should be clear policies for the recruitment, training, and appointment of a suitable pool of peer reviewers, transparency of outcomes. Agencies should make the outcomes of their quality assurance decisions public. Agencies can do that in different ways, and we encourage very much publishing the full report. However, we understand that for cultural, legal, and regulatory requirements, publishing a full report might not be possible, but at least we require quality assurance agencies to publish the list of those providers that have been successfully reviewed. It's all about transparency. Internal quality assurance, the way quality assurance agencies continuously ensure that the quality assurance, the organizational structure, their objectives, their activities remain fit for purpose. Also, Standard 14, external review of agencies. This is about quality assurance agencies having to demonstrate that they undergo regular external reviews of their operations, either through the INQAAHE ISG review process or through one of the available regional external review processes. And I will come back to regional external review processes later on, because we see the SG review process not as an alternative or in competition or in contradiction with the existing regional review processes, but as complementary and as working toward the same mission, which is that of building international trust on quality assurance systems. Integrity and transparency is about having defined ethical and professional principles. And the last section is about stakeholder engagement and thematic guidance. Again, a type of quality culture, that is thematic section 5. Apologies for that. That is about the agency demonstrating that they engage with stakeholders across all of its activities, including through its governance structure, in particular when it comes to developing the standards they use and the processes that they use to implement those standards. International engagement, engaging internationally with other quality assurance agencies, with the international quality assurance community as part of their mission to improve continuously their quality assurance activities. And finally, thematic analysis and guidance, which is about supporting the higher education sector they oversees by providing guidance, including thematic analysis of the quality assurance activities and finding underlying trends or finding across the higher education providers that they oversee. So this is really, in a nutshell, the revised ISG standards framework. I'll pause now briefly just to catch my breath for a bit, but also to check whether there are any questions for the time being. Otherwise, I'll carry on. Please do feel free to raise your hand, and if by any chance I can't see your hand because I'm sharing your screen, do not hesitate to unmute yourself and ask a question. In the 2022 ISG framework, there was a modular approach. Some of you may remember. The idea was that agencies may opt to be reviewed with to have a specifically focused review on specific areas of their quality assurance activities, and in particular their international quality assurance activity, or the quality assurance of transnational education, the quality assurance of online learning, quality assurance of micro-credentials. Now, this modular approach has been dropped, and this is for well, a main important reason, which is that it was felt, consulting with agencies which had undergone the pilot exercises, as well as consulting with reviewers, etc., that there was the risk that agencies would take their quality assurance of the specific areas of higher education provision as voluntary, and somehow that would weaken the ISG review scheme, because there was the risk that the baseline ISG review scheme will only focus on those areas of quality assurance activities which were more developed in a particular agency. I can see Fouad Ahmed that has raised his or her hand. Please, you can come in now if you want to ask a question. Please.
Yes.
Yeah.
In your earlier version, you have 16 standards,
Yeah.
and right now you have 18 standards. Could you identify the new two items inserted as new standards?
Yeah. That's a good question. Now, we've got, if I go back here, um, so we got 18 standards. However, the main difference, I would say, is very much in the minimum requirements. So in the previous version, there were 16 overarching standards, but then these were subdivided in a range of what were called guidelines, which were bullet points, which were quite complex, and there were a lot of repetition. So it ended up to be quite burdensome. So the content has been, as I was saying, reorganized. So the content has remained the same. Perhaps some standards have been split in two, they've been clarified. So I cannot really tell which standard has been dropped because somehow the content hasn't been dropped at all. It has been reorganized. As I was saying, the content has been very much safeguarded.
Okay.
Yeah. But it has, as I was saying, it once you go through it, it feels and you read very differently. But
Okay.
the content has been mapped. Nothing really has gone lost really significantly.
All right. Thank you, Fab.
Thank you very much. So I was saying the modular approach has been dropped in order to strengthen the ISG scheme, in order to make sure that international community can retain confidence in the ISG scheme, because if an agency is being reviewed through the ISG scheme and they get the ISG quality mark, they may use it for all the quality assurance activity, but then perhaps the ISG review in the former approach didn't look at specific areas of their activity, such as online learning or transnational education. So in order to strengthen the scheme, we have embedded the diversity of quality assurance activities within the baseline requirements. That also aligns better with the recognition of prior review process, and I'll come back to that. But that doesn't mean that we drop our focus, our attention on those particular areas of quality assurance activities that were captured by the modules in the 2022 scheme. In fact, our intention is that by doing so, we open up the opportunity to develop sophisticated guidance to working together with community of practice, so working together with the sector, with our memberships, develop guidance that can support quality assurance agencies in developing and improving their activities in those emerging areas of higher education provision, such as T&E, but also, for example, artificial intelligence. So we are committed to developing the guidance, and there's no reason why, if an agency may wish to be reviewed, to have a bespoke external review of a particular area of their activity beyond the ISG review scheme, we're very happy, of course, to do so. Okay, so this moving on to the handbook. This gives you a bit of an idea of the main changes, and we'll go into the details of some of those in the rest of my presentation. So we clarified each stage of the process, including the pre-application preliminary stage, which in the former scheme was a bit unclear. In fact, we've come across a number of agencies which have approached us saying we have prepared a self-evaluation document, we are now ready to go ahead, but there is no service agreement signed. So now the handbook clearly states the start of the process is with a formal application process, a formal application form, and then the signing of the service agreement. And this is important because once a service agreement is in place, then we will engage with the agency and brief them about how to fill in the self-evaluation document. So it will be as part of lessening the burden on agencies engaging with the process. We will provide a lot of guidance. So we adopt Agencies, of course, are free to start developing their self-evaluation document whenever they like. And we advise you to wait, because then we can provide a guidance to you. There will be now a template also for the self-evaluation document, which agencies will be using. I mentioned the recognition of prior review earlier on. This has traditionally been a way for us to recognize the efforts that agencies have gone through when they've been reviewed by, for example, their regional networks, a number of regional quality assurance networks, to offer external reviews. INQAAHE, of course, in Europe, also PQN in the Asian Pacific, and also in Latin America, we have external reviews, just to mention a few. And when an agency has been reviewed externally by a recognized regional network, we are keen to recognize that. We don't want to duplicate efforts. However, in the past, there was somehow we were placing quite a lot of burden on agencies in having to demonstrate how the regional review met the ISG standards, or in the precedent version, the guidance of good practice. And that we thought was burdensome, but also opened up to possible inconsistencies, because different agencies may do different mapping against the same set, between the same set of standards. So going forward, we will be doing the mapping of the ISG against the regional standards framework, and we'll be looking to engage strategically with those regional networks, and then we will issue recognition against those standards which have been mapped. And I will expand a bit more on this later on. Flexible review format, again, in order to lessen the financial burden, in particular on agencies with a track record of engaging with INQAAHE for an external review, or with the regional networks, can opt to have the reviews online. And if they wish to have it in person, they can have it in person. They will have to bear the financial costs for that. We thought that, although of course we all agree that in-person visits have a different feel and allow different types of engagement, we thought that in particular for those agencies with a track record, it is less critical. So we wouldn't compromise the robustness of the process. It is different having to visit higher education institutions, where being able to go in loco and understand how students learn and are taught, it is very important. But when visiting quality assurance agencies, that can be a bit different. Also, given that these days many quality assurance agencies often work from home, and sometimes it has happened that our review team would go into a location, and then in that location they would meet national stakeholders online. So, but this is a conversation that we're open to have with the agencies reviewed. For just agencies which have not a track record of external review, we offer the possibility of having a hybrid visit, whereby a local or regional reviewer will be visiting in person, while the other reviewers will join online. Again, this will be conversation with each agency about the format of the review at the very initial stages of engagement. There are clearer decision criteria, more nuanced compliance levels, which I'll outline in a bit. Standardized reporting. There wasn't a template for the ISG review reports. Now we have a template, clarified and strengthened appeal process, and importantly, an enhanced role for the review manager, what previously was called project coordinator. The review manager now will be really the INQAAHE phase and the INQAAHE person throughout the review process, and the review manager will liaise with the agency, will be the first point of contact for the agencies, for the review team, and they will play a critical role in supporting the smooth implementation and consistent implementation of the process. Eligibility requirements to engage with the ISG review process. Legal status: the agency must be legally established and operate within an appropriate regular framework. regulatory framework. This is also one of the criteria for INQAAHE membership, for example. They must have an operational track record of at least 2 years, so they must have had experience of doing external quality assurance reviews or activities for at least 2 years, and they must be either a member of INQAAHE or a member of a recognized regional quality assurance network. There are 3 routes to obtaining an ISG alignment. One is the full review, which I will describe the main steps of the full review in a second. Then there is the recognition of prior review, which I've just outlined. And the way we work is, as I was saying, when there is when we feel that there is a comprehensive mapping of the ISG standards framework with that of the regional agency, which has already reviewed the regional network that has already reviewed the agency applying for ISG review, then we may decide we may be able just to issue an ISG alignment through some form of automatic recognition without having to go through an ISG review process. Where the mapping is not comprehensive, perhaps there are a few ISG standards that are not covered by the regional networks, then the ISG review process will focus only on those standards, and we will ask the agency to submit a self-evaluation document only for those standards, and that there will be a very, very streamlined and focused review exercise. We will still appoint a team of peer reviewers, but will be a lighter touch approach, depending also on the extent of mapping with the ISG standards. The review could just be desk-based. There may not be need to do a review visit or review visit meetings. I also included here the fees. The fees haven't really changed from the previous scheme, with the 2 only exceptions. One, we are making a distinction between INQAAHE members and non-members. This is to recognize the contribution that INQAAHE members do to the INQAAHE Secretariat, and also to accommodate for the administrative cost of managing the ISG review. So non-members not paying an annual fee to INQAAHE will pay a bit more for the ISG review. And for the full review, we only added $500 to the previous total costing. This is to account for the enhanced role now that the review manager will play. So the costs are very much comparable to that of the previous scheme. I've covered this, and there is a third route to gain ISG alignment, which we call joint review. This is when, for example, an agency is planning or wishes to go through a regional a review from a regional network, from their regional network, but at the same time they may not want to wait that review for then applying for recognition of prior review, but they would like to be reviewed by the regional network and by INQAAHE at the same time. They're very much open to this type of arrangement. The details and the cost of each specific joint review will have to be ironed out on a case-by-case basis, depending on the regional network, the particular circumstances. But we envisage that the main model will be the formation of a joint panel, which will review the self-evaluation against both set of standards, and then produce into different reports, which will feed into the respective decision-making processes. As for the full ISG review process, these are the main steps. There is now a formal application process. You can ask the Secretariat to have for an application form. It's a very, very brief application form, really setting out where you'll be asked to demonstrate that you meet the eligibility requirements, but also where you can already express whether you're intending to have a recognition of prior review or a joint review, for example. Then we will engage to define the service agreement, and at this stage also we'll also finalize whether the review visit will be online, in person, hybrid. Then, as the first point of As a first step, we will establish communication lines. INQAAHE will appoint a review manager, and the agency will be asked to appoint an agency coordinator, and the review manager and the agency coordinator will be the key point of contact between INQAAHE and the agency throughout the process. At this stage, the agency will be briefed by the review manager, on occasion in particular, to talk about the self-evaluation document and how to develop it and submit it. A review panel will be formed. Our review panels will be composed by 3 international experts, which are briefed and trained on the ISG review scheme, of course, and at least one of these will be from the region, possibly even from the country when this may be required by certain quality assurance agencies. And this is particularly important when we agree to do a hybrid review visit, so that the agency will have to pay, so there will be a less financial burden on the agencies having to fly in someone from closer by. Then there's a self-evaluation document. As I say, now there is a template that you can use, and once you submit the self-evaluation document, the review panel will undertake a desk-based review, that which will inform the review visit. I've outlined the timeline, which I think I pick up again here. But I think I can talk about timeline now. So there's quite a lot of flexibility in the timeline. What we say is once we do the service agreement, we commit to do an agency briefing in around 10 working days, and then we ask the agency to submit the self-evaluation document within 6 months. Hopefully that will be less than 6 months. We expect that on average, agency may require 3 months. If an agency may require more than 6 months, we ask them to let us know straight away, because then we need to coordinate things with the review panel. Once we receive the self-evaluation document, then we commit to turn it around in 30 working days, after which we can then start considering doing the review visit. So we expect that the review visit may take place just after the self-evaluation document, so perhaps between 2 to 3 months after the submission of the self-evaluation document. So after the desk-based review, I meant to say. But we don't want the review visit to take place much later than that, because it is not fair for the review panel. The review visits really need to be done when the desk-based review is still fresh in the mind of the review panel. So we expect that worst case scenario, so when an agency may take more time to submit the self-evaluation document, the whole process may take around 11 months. If an agency submits a self-evaluation document quite early, the process can be streamlined to 6-7 months. But again, we're flexible. The important thing is to make sure that we communicate with each other as soon as we know that there are issues and problems in complying with set timelines. At the end of the review, our review panels will share the findings report, which will contain recommendations, suggestions, recommendations. They will share it first with the recognition committee. So this is the committee I chair. This recognition committee also has undergone some changes. So we have appointed a new recognition committee in July, which for the first time involve external expertise. So it is not only composed by INQAAHE board members. There are some board members in the committee, but also external experts, and that allow us to that strengthen the process with an additional independent layer of scrutiny. So the recognition committee will look at the draft findings report to ensure that to ensure that it is robust, that it complies with the ISG review process, and in particular also that it is consistent with other ISG review reports. And then that will be shared with the agency, which will have 10 working days to do an accuracy check. And after that, it goes back to the recognition committee, which will make the final decision. There are 3 possible outcomes, but there are 5 possible outcomes, and I'll go to the next slide, which sets this out more clearly. An agency may be found to be fully compliant. In order to be fully compliant, an agency must be fully compliant with all the standards. An agency may be found substantially compliant, and in this case, an agency, in order to be considered substantially compliant, an agency must not fail compliance with any standard. So they shouldn't be non-compliant with any standard, but they won't be fully compliant with at least one standard, and they should be at least substantially compliant with more than 50% of the standards. And this assessment will be made holistically by the review panel, looking at the minimum requirements for each standard. So when an agency is fully compliant or substantially compliant, will be regarded as ISG compliant and will be granted the ISG quality mark with a validity period of 5 years. We recognize, however, that agencies may require improvements in certain areas. So we've introduced more nuanced categories of partial compliance, which we call compliance for a limited validity period of 2 years, or compliance contingent on meeting specific conditions. This is quite technical, but it actually is not. It's quite intuitive. So compliance for a limited validity period of 2 years is when an agency is not non-compliant with any standards, but there's no standards against which they are not compliant at all, but they are partially compliant with more than 50% of the standards. And when the review panel deemed that the agency will be able to reduce its partial compliance to below the 50% threshold within 2 years' time, then they will grant them this limited validity period. And then after the 2 years' time, the agencies must report to INQAAHE to demonstrate that they've addressed the issues and they've reached substantial compliance, if not full compliance, with the remaining standards. When an agency, when the review panel finds that an agency is non-compliant with no more than 2 standards, and they feel that the agency should be likely to reach at least partial compliance with those non-compliant standards within 1 year, then rather than sending back the agency, failing the agency, we're saying, we're giving you 1 year time to address those issues that the review panel has found, and then you come back to us in 1 year time with a report demonstrating that you've met those specific conditions, and then if everything goes okay, then we will issue ISG compliance then. If an agency doesn't meet any of the above categories, will be deemed non-compliant. They can reapply no earlier than 2 years. In case of no compliance, the ISG review will be considered confidential. Will be considered as a confidential enhancement-oriented exercise. Whilst when an agency is compliant, the reports will be published on our website, and also the agency will be listed on the ISG review register, which is the register of all successfully reviewed agencies, as well as being granted the ISG quality mark with clear instructions for use. Now I'll stop here. I'm aware really that I've thrown at you a lot of information. Yeah, I hope you found this helpful. Do you have any questions? There's no silly questions. Anything you would like to raise or any comments you would like to make? The floor is open.
So Fabrizio, there were a couple of some questions in the chat, which
Okay.
I took care of, but maybe it would be a good idea to also, comment them.
Yeah. So I've stopped sharing so I can see the chat box now. Okay. How long does the recognition last for? Yes, I addressed that. It is 5 years, unless you've got that 2 years conditional validity period. And that was already addressed. Can you give an example of an energy track record? I will review. Yeah, in terms of track record here, we refer to track record of having been successfully reviewed by an external entity, which could be INQAAHE through previous ISG reviews or previous GGP reviews, or by a regional network, for example, ENCA or PQN. If there is a track record of being externally reviewed, then we can consider that as evidence that there has been an oversight of already of the operation of the agency. So there is no need for us to go and visit them physically. But again, I stress that for many agencies find value in being reviewed in person. So we understand that. We check that with many agencies we talk to as we were revising the scheme, and we're very happy to do it in person if the agency is happy to do so, but they will have to bear the cost for that. Would the regional review, does it follow? Okay. For the composition of the review panel, yes, as probably already answered, Bea, yeah, we will put it together. The review manager, together with the recognition committee, will put it together. We will share our proposed composition with the agency. This is only for the purpose of clearing any potential conflict of interest. And if the agency is happy with that, if the agency doesn't find any conflict of interest, then we confirm that. We don't generally ask for nomination by part of the agency. There was actually, I had a conversation, a relevant conversation on this point recently with a Canadian agency, which as part of national regulation mandates that the agency is externally reviewed, but they also mandate that the external review should involve a national or a local reviewer. So that's why I was saying earlier on that we're very happy to include a national reviewer, but we wouldn't generally. We would look for the expert ourselves. We wouldn't ask the agency to be reviewed to nominate the reviewer they would like to be reviewed by, for obvious reason. So this, I believe, address the question asked in the chat. Gersha, I can see you've got your hand raised.
Yes. Hi, good morning. It's Monique here in Trinidad.
Good morning.
I'm asking a two-part question. Thank you so much for that presentation. Firstly, when would the new ISG standards be applied? From what date, if you have a date from which they are going to be used?
Yeah.
And secondly, what advice would you give to institutions or agencies that have reached maybe about 50 to 60% of the 2022 standards in terms of their preparation? Should they continue with that, or, this one seems a lot more user-friendly. Should they switch to the new ones?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very important question. As I was saying earlier on, the previous process wasn't really clear to agencies that they should really sign a service agreement before starting preparations, because also once the service agreement is in place, then you receive the support from the INQAAHE Secretariat, from the review manager, so they will help you in the development of the self-evaluation document. So going back to your two questions, the first one is where the ISG review scheme. There's the new ISG standards framework. They are live, so now agencies can start applying to undergo ISG review under the new framework, under the new process. If you would like to do so, please get in touch with the Secretariat. They will arrange, they will share an application form, or they will arrange a one-to-one meeting to discuss things further. So absolutely, we can start from now. We are already starting. We have already received a couple of expressions of interest to proceed with the new framework. A number of agencies have started to develop the self-evaluation document against the old standards framework. Now, my honest advice is if you haven't really done 100% of the work, if you haven't the self-evaluation document already ready, my honest advice is please do use the new self-evaluation document, because that facilitates, I think, your work. It facilitates the work of the review panel. It ensures the consistency of the process. So if you haven't completed the self-evaluation document against the old framework, use the new standards framework. As I was saying, the content is retained, so it is only the way in which it is structured that changes. So all the material that you've used to demonstrate compliance against the former framework can be used to demonstrate compliance against the new framework. However, there are a couple of agencies that have got in touch saying we were ready to submit the self-evaluation document. What shall we do? On an exceptional basis, we said, listen, when the new standards framework is out, we will share the self-evaluation document with you. If you think that it is too much work to accommodate the self-evaluation document that you have already written into the new template, we can consider using your old self-evaluation document, because again, the content is comparable and there will be just more burden on the review panel, which will have to extract the relevant content to inform the review process against the new framework. However, we sincerely encourage agencies to engage with the new framework through the new self-evaluation document template. I hope that helps, Geisha.
Oh, yes, very helpful. And just one last question. In terms of the length of this new self-evaluation submission, is it comparable? Because you had a word limit, or sorry, a page limit before of 60 pages, 10 appendices, etc. Do those issues still apply?
Yeah, it is comparable. I should know. I can't remember. We have a limit, a page limit for each standards, which could be 2 or 3 pages. So we put a limit. I think it's 3 pages max for each standards. We hope that an agency may require less. It is really about providing only the necessary information required to demonstrate compliance. And so if you say 2 on average, say 2 pages for standards, 80 or 30, around 40 pages, we would expect possibly the whole self-evaluation document to be around 40, 45, maximum 50 pages. So it is comparable, hopefully even less than required before.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? And of course, if you have any questions at any point, do get in touch with the Secretariat. They will be able really to get back to you. Rima Lalawi.
Yes, hi Fabrizio. My question was about the service contract. Do we have a specific timeline for that, or it can be done anytime, and then the arrangement of the submission can be then discussed with the Secretary?
Well, the service agreement is really the starting point. It officially, formally starts an ISG review process. So we wouldn't, for example, allocate a review manager before the service agreement is in place. However, you can. So we do the service agreement whenever the agency is ready. However, the agency can start engaging with Secretariat before signing a service agreement at any time to discuss and raise any questions they may have. So we're happy to meet with agencies and go through details and understand the particular situations to inform them the service agreement pending a successful application form. Again, as I was saying, agencies, if they wish, they can put themselves ahead and start developing their own self-evaluation document before a service agreement is signed. But we make, I want to stress that we are not liable for the work that agencies do before signing a service agreement. That's for obvious reason, because things may change, like it has happened this time. We may do a revision, and so if there's no service agreement in place, there's anything binding any party to particular expectations. But we're very open to meet with agencies and discuss their needs, any needs that they may have in their particular circumstances.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope I addressed that. Okay, Reem. Daniela.
Hi, thank you, Fabrizio. My question is regarding for organizations that are currently recognized under the old standards, and our recognition ends, let's say, in a couple of years.
Yeah.
At that point, we will be reviewed against the new ISGs. Is it the responsibility of the agency being reviewed to initiate that reevaluation process or re-review process, or does INQAAHE will INQAAHE reach out to us and inform us that, hey, we need to start reviewing and planning? Who initiates that interaction?
Sure, good question, Daniela. Yes, absolutely. INQAAHE will send a reminder to agencies that the ISG validity period is come to an end, and then of course it will be up to the agency to decide whether they would like to renew or not. An agency may be more proactive than the INQAAHE Secretariat, and 1 year in advance may already reach out. But absolutely, the INQAAHE Secretariat will get in touch with agency nearing the time to the end of the validity period. Yeah, thank you for the question. Cindy.
Thank you. And thanks again for the presentation. I'm just wondering, as part of the standard that covers looking at a QAA's quality assurance framework, are you able to give explicit feedback in response to any requests for if we're considering changing an element of the framework or wondering if it's still meeting international best practice and standards? Are you able to give us very explicit advice and recommendations and feedback if we put that into our self-study? Is that possible?
Well, that's an interesting question, Cindy. This as addresses that perennial dilemma of drawing the line between being a coach and a referee. So it really depends on the type of questions. We're really open to engage with the members because we are committed to enhancement in quality assurance systems and to help them enhancing. And the ISG is only an element of the process. I would say the only thing is that we may be able to provide advice where we are able to, but that doesn't mean the main issue is that because the ISG review is a peer review led process, the secretariat or the INQAAHE board may be able to provide advice in response to a question from an agency. But then it is for the ISG review panel to make the final assessment on how the agency may have been successful in demonstrating compliance with a particular standard. if you know what I mean. So we are happy to provide advice, but that advice doesn't guarantee you compliance with the ISG standard. That will be an independent judgment made by the review panel, and then ultimately the decision will be made by the recognition committee.
Okay, I think I was imagining that it would actually be through the report of the review panel. Are we able to get any advice or feedback through that whole review process?
I see. Absolutely.
Apologies if I wasn't clear.
Yeah, that's right. My mistake, but because I've had that question before, whether we may help with the development of the self-evaluation document, and that is it is trickier. Yeah, absolutely. The report will contain suggestions for improvement as well as recommendation when it comes to elements that really address the minimum requirements. So we see that the main function of engaging with the ISG review process is really that is the possibility for the agencies this opportunity to have an external perspective on how they're doing. So those suggestions for improvement, those recommendations are somehow really the raison d'etre of doing the ISG review. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, and apologies for the confusion.
No, my mistake. Any other questions, or have I missed anything from the chat? How early should the agency? Sorry.
If I may ask, sorry.
Please.
Yes, I just need to find out. I am from Lesotho, and as the agency in Lesotho, we have membership at INQAAHE. So I just want to find out, can this also apply to us, or is it mainly for maybe countries in the European side? Thank you.
No, it applies to any quality assurance agency internationally. Members of INQAAHE or agencies which might not be members of INQAAHE, but they're member of a regional network. We open up the ISG review to non-INQAAHE member because we recognize that, again, as part of our commitment to lessen the burden on agencies, we recognize that some agencies may not have the resources to subscribe to two networks. Some agencies may prefer to prioritize the resources for a regional network. If that is the case, and if the regional network is a legitimate network, then we are happy, however, to provide our ISG review services to the agency. However, we do encourage, of course, all agencies to engage with the INQAAHE community, because we really do believe in the value of an international and a INQAAHE community of practice. So absolutely, and it is not limited to Europe or any region. INQAAHE is a global network, and indeed, the ISG review aims. I mean, really, there are two main drivers behind the ISG review. One is enhancement, as I was saying in response to Cindy's question. The other one is to contribute, to offer a tool to the international higher education quality assurance community that could help establishing an international education space, in particular by building on the momentum of the UNESCO Global Recognition Convention. So we hope that the ISG review register can serve as that ultimate repository for building trust in quality assurance agencies, quality assurance systems, and ultimately in the higher education provision that those quality assurance agencies oversees and their qualifications. So we do welcome international engagement with the process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further question? Oh, thank you, Lee. Much appreciated. Okay, so I'm conscious of the time. But there's another question. Could you kindly elaborate on online mode review? Supposing going for full review, first mode, first review, the three is conducted survey. Okay, so the idea is, if I understand, so a full review, an in-person review is a traditional review, which usually would span out across 3 days. The 3 reviewers and the review manager will come to you, and there will be a traditional site visit. Now, for fully online, the whole review team and the review managers will meet online with the different stakeholders within the agency. Because of time differences, we envisage that the review visit will be spread out possibly across 5 days, because we may not be able to use a full day for review visit meetings. So perhaps just the morning or the afternoon, depending on the time zones. And the same when there is a hybrid visit. So we will have the local or regional reviewer visiting in person, the agency and the other 2 reviewers from farther away joining online. And again, in order to accommodate time differences, we may have to spread out the review across 5 days. I hope that address your question. Thank you very much for all your questions, really, because we find this it is the second time that we elaborate, we disseminate, we present the revised schemes to our members and to the community. We did an information session yesterday. That was the first one. This is the second one. So that helped us clarifying also the way in which we should present the revised scheme. So I also welcome feedback to all of you. If there is information that you think we should have delivered today and we haven't, particular information that you think we should provide, just do let us know. And your questions were really good. They really helped unpacking some of the details that I had mentioned in the presentation. Is it possible for INQAAHE to offer initial feedback of the SED before the formal review? No, this goes back to, this is the question that I thought Cindy was asking me somehow. The answer would be no. We wouldn't provide feedback on the SED, but what we do is we provide clear guidance at the beginning. So as soon as the service agreement is in place, there will be an agency briefing where the review manager will talk you through all the stages. You can ask any questions. Of course, you can ask any questions about the process anytime. We're happy to ask any questions around the completion of the self-evaluation document also whilst you complete the self-evaluation document, but we wouldn't be able to review your self-evaluation document and say this is okay. Because again, we need to draw a line between coach and referees, and then it is the review panel will be reviewing the self-evaluation document, and we don't want, for example, it will have to be the secretariat or the recognition committee to provide feedback on your self-evaluation document draft, and we wouldn't want to be responsible for you making any mistakes somehow, if you know what I mean. So no, we wouldn't provide initial feedback, but we can answer any question you may have. In doubt, ask a question, and then if we can't answer the question, we will explain why. Or can we allow missing evidence during the 30-day desk review window? Absolutely. So when you submit the self-evaluation document and the accompanying evidence, the review panel will start reviewing all that. They will typically meet midway through the period, say 15 days, in order to start assessing whether there is any evidence that they think is missing. So you may expect, the agency may expect a request for further information with at the end of those 30 days. But also the agency, if the agency realizes that they've missed to submit some evidence, they can submit that evidence within that 30 days window. Now, for outcomes which are not positive, There is, of course, an appeal process. Also, the agency may be able, during the factual accuracy check, for any type of outcome, in fact, during the factual accuracy check, if an agency realizes that they had some evidence that they missed to submit, and I'm talking about existing evidence, not evidence that has been developed in response of the review report, then the process allows for the agency to submit that piece of evidence, which may help the review panel changing or addressing parts of the draft report, including possibly some of the findings. Again, it is only existing evidence that the agency, for whatever reason, may have missed out in submitting. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much again. I'm conscious of time. And do not hesitate to get in touch with the Secretariat, with me, for any other follow-up questions. If you would like to have a one-to-one meeting to discuss things through in more details, please do let us know. We're very happy to do so. And thank you very much again for tuning in and for asking very, very good questions. Thank you.